So using the Dawn of Man segment from 2001: A Space Odyssey as a point of departure, again, I think one of the questions is it the intent of Kubrick / Arthur C. Clarke that we understand the dawn of man as being incepted by our use of the first tool? Was it tool use, tool making? Was it the ability to invoke John Locke from the 1600s, who we'll talk about later? This summer, probably in abbreviated form. If you had 3080 with me, I trust you remember the essential Locke well. But is it to understand that moment when we realized that we could extend our very being? To understand the usage of property, of the thing that I hold in my hand, as being something new unto the world. That for the first time, I am actually able to extend my very being. My being and what I can create and the devastation that I can bring is no longer limited to my physical instantiation. I can now use a tool with which to build, create wealth, and destroy. It's a new means to invoke a military term. What was the great disruptively innovative value-added proposition of naval warfare? Power projection. Power projection. How is it that the world came to know that the United States, after the Spanish-American War, splendid little war, right? Lasted about an hour and a half. Actually lasted a couple of months, but from the perspective of much of the world, that still understood the great Spanish Armada, the Spanish Navy, as being the great seafaring power of the world. Now, at the turn of the century, now that the United States, by virtue of that splendid little war, was able to occupy islands such as Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, Guam, where we still have a rather significant military base, that represented the United States' ability to project power. It was no longer necessary for countries like Japan and China to fear American might from across the Pacific. Now they needed to fear American might from just the southern part of the China Sea. Our ability to make ourselves known to various other powers around the world was now shortened in distance and time by our ability to reach them, right? To hurt them by virtue of these new extensions of ourself. And so is that really when we came into being? When we were able to extend our physical bodies, first with this little or not so little bone. I mean, if you were perhaps the first political assassinee, right? That other ape dude who got his ass kicked at the edge of that little cesspool. From his perspective, that was not a little taper bone. Thank you very much. It must have been a big ass one to shatter my skull in the way that it did. But power projection. Or is it, as I suggested near the end of the last lecture, is it that we should really understand the dawn of man, the essential us, not so much the anthropomorphic us, right? Not so much the physical us, right? But almost the philosophical us. Rather, should we understand the dawn of our species as being a particular usage of the tool, the extension of ourself, which was as depicted in the way that it was in the film segment, a premeditated murder. The in the book, which as I mentioned, really didn't come into being until they were actually shooting the movie, because again, let me make sure everyone's here, because Kubrick understands these two stories that he's just read from Clark. He loves them both, one more than the other. One of them is more the centerpiece of what would ultimately become the screenplay in the book 2001. And so he enlists Clark. And it's only after, once they start making the movie, that Clark completes the whole thesis, right? In writing the screenplay for the movie, basically from these two short stories that Clark had previously written. It's through the process of writing the screenplay that he actually writes the book. And in the book are these two quotes that I have replicated here. The one that I like the most is after the assassination, after the projection of power in a way that makes everyone else understand why it is that Moonwatcher is now, at least momentarily, the king of the world, the master of the world, right? It's after that moment in the book. He throws up the bone and, jubilation, right? Now he was master of the world. And he was not quite sure what he would do next, but he would think of something. Well, as we know, it took tens of thousands of years, actually a couple of 100,000 years more. It's around 800,000 years ago, more or less, that teens into the developing brain of a hominid that would ultimately become the Homo sapien. It's with the mass introduction of meat proteins that we finally developed the prefrontal cortex, and it's almost a million years or so, maybe 800,000 years of a steady diet of dead animal meat. It's after 800,000 to a million years that finally we begin to see the results of that, which is anthropomorphically through the archaeological record, a brain that is now undergoing a real growth spurt. If anyone has any kids, I have three that I admit to. They're 18, 15. Hey, that's right. 18, 15, and 12. And my 15-year-old. Anyone got any kids in the teen area? Yeah, yeah, Daniel. That's why Daniel and I. That's right. Hey, you do it your way, I do mine, right?
This is true.
Yeah. So these kids have these growth spurts, right? And of course, my 15-year-old has to be a baller, right? He plays anything that involves a ball, and damn well, or at least BC, before Pinchi Corona. But buy my kid Nico, right? A pair of sneakers or whatever you call them these days, right? And they're not even broken in yet.
They no longer fit.
And they no longer fit, right? Yeah, brother Daniel knows what I'm talking about, right? They no longer fit. So there's this growth spurt, right? And now that he's at the age of 15, he's taller than his old man. It was about 800,000 years ago that we have this growth spurt. It's only in the last 10,000 years that we know. In the last 10,000 years, the global climate systems, after about 4.5 billion years of this floating rock going through various wild fluctuations in its climate systems, Finally, about 10,000 years ago, the global climate system stabilized to within about plus or minus 1 degree Celsius. That is the Holocene period. And so we have been a rather clever being for maybe a couple of hundred, 200,000, 190,000 years, but we don't see any evidence of it until about 10,000 years ago, the beginning of the Holocene era. Why? Because we just didn't have the climate stability to climb down from the trees, out of the caves, look across the savanna of North Africa, as was depicted in the film, and then ask ourselves, I wonder what's over there. And then have the time in a temperate climate to actually go out there and see what was over there. And what ended up being over there, of course, is places like, well, once we got out of Africa, the Mesopotamia, the birthplace of civilization, between the Tigris and Euphrates River, what is now Iraq. You remember your sixth grade or sophomore high school civics, right? World history. And then about 5,000 years ago, we see cave paintings, right? The beginning of abstract thought, or at least the beginning of, at least that's as far back as we can identify abstract thought. Between 9 and 12,000 years ago in cave paintings, they now have morphed and graduated in their sophistication into symbolism, characters, letters, right? And so now in civilization like Sumeria, 5,000 years ago, Sumeria, we have, of course, the Hammurabi Code, right, which is perhaps the first, certainly the oldest that we've found. As far as we know, the first written or chiseled articulation of what the law of the land is. It's the King Hammurabi. This was his code, right? Thou shalt not do this. Thou shalt do this. About it's only once we come out of the so-called Bronze Age, the rise of what we refer to as the Axial Age, AXIAL, about 2,500 years ago or so, that we see a sudden and dramatic change in our intellectual preoccupations. Let me put it that way, because almost simultaneously, I've got a couple of students who apparently they come in and they get knocked out. And I need to convince her it's nothing personal on my part. I just think it's kind of fun. Let's see. Is that is that Nicole? Nicole's doing doing a thumbs up, saying yes. Nicole paid me $20 to be here. I pretend that she really gives a shit about your class, Cardinus. So so with about 2,500 years ago or so, we see in India, in China, and also, of course, in the Near East or Middle East, almost simultaneously, at least from the perspective of our evolution, there arise these monotheistic imaginations where belief systems in three basic anchors of intellectualism: the old Indus Valley, what is now India, ancient China, and Mesopotamia, Canaan, the Middle East, later referred to as the Holy Land, referred to later as the Holy Land because about between 2,500 and 3,000 years ago, at virtually the same time in these three very ancient hotspots of intellectualism, multi-theistic belief systems in all kinds of gods begin to morph into there must only be one God. And the tradition that we study, because both modern democracy and capitalism arise from it, which is our preoccupation as we seek to understand the era of modernity, which is uh, where the modern globalized economy. Was that the person who is currently known as Nicole? If we could turn off your audio. Yeah, I know you wish I would too. I'm going to keep mine on, but if you would turn off your audio, but keep on your video, that would be that would be great. It doesn't take much to distract me, is what I'm saying. So um, in in ancient Greece, about 2,500 years ago, uh, you the the monotheism, if I can refer to it that way, or the the evolution away from a multi-deistic imagination really begins with the Greek, the High Greek classic philosophical period. In other words, Socrates, Plato, uh, and Aristotle. But this isn't the only. This is hardly the only significant development begat by these three guys. Uh, we're going to start with Socrates. Now, first, some basic foundational axiomatic positions that the High Greeks take. Okay, and this is innovative. It's also significantly dangerous. Ultimately, would cost Socrates his life, as we know. Significantly dangerous because uh, you can tell right away as we begin to look at the basic axiomatic principles of the High Greeks, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. You can imagine how this would be dangerous to a multi-theistic imagination where there are dozens of gods. Right, the Greeks and then later the Romans would have all kinds of gods. Right, to you remember the film? Maybe it's now about what 8 years old. The first of the two Lightning Thief movies, right? Zeus and Apollo and all of that. Um, for the High Greek classics prior to Socrates, but inherited by Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, the the starting point is a conviction that there is an objective truth. There is an objective truth. That is to say, uh, uh, there are things about the world, about the cosmos, which must surely be true. And they are objective truths because individual opinion has nothing to do with it. What's true is true. Okay, even if we all deny it, right? Like climate change, right? At a certain point, you've got enough empirical evidence from around the world to come to the conclusion that holy shit, this is really happening. No matter how many people continue to at least pretend that they are denying the reality of climate change. And so the Greeks posit that there is an objective truth. For that objective truth, or if they be multiple, these objective truths, they can be knowable by us. Whereas previously, some gods in the Greek system were the holders of a particular truth or a particular set of truths, some of which we might come to know or have the capacity to know, but we may never know all of the truths of the various gods who oversee Greek society. And then starting with Democritus and Herodicus and Pythagoras, yes, the Pythagorean theorem, right? These guys who lay the foundation for Socrates and the rest, they begin to move toward a position that there's an objective truth and we can know it. what makes Socrates so dangerous is that Socrates then takes that one step further, and Socrates says, not only is there an objective truth, and not only do we humans have the capacity to at least one day know the truth, we can arrive at that truth simply by using our reason, our rationality, our intelligence, period. Now I say period because for most people around Socrates, right? Uh, in other words, the majority of the people of Athens, the particular Greek city-state that Socrates and Plato come from. Aristotle doesn't come from Athens, but he studies in Athens. He's from Macedonia, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people don't like Aristotle, because he's like, what's this Macedonian doing over here? You're not from our neighborhood. And so I agree with those who take the position that the fact that Aristotle was never fully embraced by the other guys in the school of Athens or the Athenian Academy uh, may play a role in the subtext of why Aristotle makes the break that he does with with a school that becomes increasingly Platonic, followers of Plato, a son of Athens. But for the Greeks, at a minimum, there must be a comma there, and what follows that comma is uh, and with proper consultation of the gods. And what Socrates is arguing, at least implicitly, but toward the end of his life, more and more explicitly and less obliquely, is no, no, we do not require the insight of the gods to help us understand the truth. We have all that we need in order to be able to understand the truth. Socrates never goes to so far as to say there ain't no fucking gods, but it's understood that he's essentially taking that position, which provides those people who realize that he must come to death. It gives them all the ammunition that they need in order to make the argument that look, this is why we're putting this guy to death. It's not because we have thin skin and he pissed us off. The historical record, such as it is, suggests that in fact a lot of them did have thin skin and he did piss them off. And so and so let's get a little bit deeper to the guy who significantly started it all, Socrates. Um, Socrates, as far as we know, never wrote anything down. And if the man ever wrote anything down, we have yet to find it. Almost all that we know about this amazing guy Socrates, right? Arguably the big papa of the Western philosophical intellectual tradition. We know about 90% of what we know from Socrates from only two guys. This trippy guy named Xenophon. He heavyweight in his own weight. He's not what concerns us, but the vast majority of what we know or believe, at least about Socrates, we know from Plato, his most famous student. So Socrates, the dates get a little bit sketchy. Because it was so long ago, right? I was only a boy myself at the time. Socrates is believed to have been born at about 427 BC, before the Common Era, before the Christ. And he did leave this world because the trial, the very public trial, and the persecution and execution of Socrates is well chronicled, and we can triangulate it from a variety of Athenian sources. He left this world in 347 at approximately the age of 80. So Socrates. Socrates, like most Athenians, served in the army and served in war. Why did most Athenians serve in war? Because this was a period of a lot of wars among the Greek city states. The most famous wars, the most well chronicled wars, and perhaps the most frequent and bloody wars were those between Athens and Sparta, right? The Spartans, as in the Michigan State Spartans. You remember the Peloponnesian Wars, right? So um, Socrates was lived the early part of his life during a brief period of peace. But then in his 20s or 30s, the Peloponnesian Wars pick up again. It gets hot and heavy, and he goes to serve. I think it's Xenophon, not so much Plato, suggests that when Socrates came back, he was never the same. If anyone's ever known anyone who has gone off and has actually seen battle, they come back and they're not necessarily the same by virtue of what they've seen, what they've encountered, and perhaps what they were necessarily called upon to do. Uh, so Socrates apparently comes back from the experience a little bit rattled, but his intellect is quite clearly profound. So in his younger days, up until maybe 40ish or so, he was uh, uh, he was he was known around Athens as just another Pythagorean type of what we would refer to as kind of a scientist, right? Uh, uh, um, Many will say that Isaac Newton is really the uh, our first scientist. Others will take the position, no, it's actually Galileo, which makes sense to me. Uh, Still, others will make the argument that even Galileo, and then Kepler and Copernicus, and finally Sir Isaac Newton, uh, might not have the intellectual tools and the methodological approach to the scientific inquiry had it not been for Aristotle's causes and Aristotle's way of trying to understand the natural world, which is profoundly Socratic. So Socrates was concerned with things like botany, right? Trees, which was core to Aristotle's science, also, if you will. But then at some point, and at this, and Socrates is seen apparently by other Athenians as just kind of a strange guy. But there's a moment in his life that Plato says Socrates told his students about, where Socrates, according to Plato, explains how he reoriented. These are my words. He reorients the things that he's concerned about, right? And so he is no longer so much concerned with animals and plants and things of a worldly nature, and instead he turns his attention toward what might actually constitute the truth, not the truth of this little animal. What are the great truths, right? What are the great truths that make these little truths even possible? What are the originating foundational truths of the universe? So the demarcation point, the point at which Socrates has his aha moment, uh, as far as we know, no monolith arrives, right? That thing in the dawn of man. In the book, it's clear that that is the monolith. It's referred to as the monolith, right? And so uh, it's an ancient archetype of what Joseph Campbell would later refer to as the hero's journey, and this archetypical um, part of the story is that wisdom comes to the truth seeker from outside of this world or outside of this plane of reality, right? And so in 2001, the wisdom that arrives, right, and is made possible by the monolith, that in the book, Clark makes clear what is not clear in the movie. That comes from uh, a wildly advanced civilization that sees humankind evolving here on this floating blue rock, and realizes that we need some kickstarts to our evolution. And so, at certain key strategic moments in the development of our being, this super sentient, right, uh, civilization somewhere in the universe delivers onto us, or at least some among us, like Moonwatcher, the monolith, which, by the way, appears a couple of extra times later on in the flick 2001. But what was Socrates? Did he have some monolithic aha moment? A little bit. So, according to Plato, what Socrates told his students is, my children, this is when I took a whole new turn in my intellectual life. He said, a friend of mine, whose name I forget, Socrates or something like that. Yeah, trippy names back then, right? Socrates. Uh, Socrates thought that I was a very wise guy. I don't mean like a mafioso wise guy, a wise person. Let's put it that way. A wise person. He came to me. He said, "You're a wise dude, Socrates." I'm paraphrasing. "You're a wise dude, Socrates. You're bad." And then I, Socrates, told him, I said, "Get out of here, man. I ain't all that much." And so Cyclophiles, whatever his name is, he goes to uh, uh, where Athenians back then apparently would go to, right? This was their go-to well for knowledge. You ever hear of the the Oracle of Delphi? The Oracle of Delphi, right? You ever wonder where a multi-billionaire, I don't know if he's the fourth or fifth most richest American right now, Larry Ellison. You know Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle software. You ever wonder where he got the idea to call his software, which has made him rather wealthy, Oracle, the Oracle of Delphi. So maybe now to come back to you. So in Greek mythology, although they say it actually probably there actually probably was an Oracle of Delphi, in Greek, in Greek, the Greek story, let's say, is that there was this cave, right? And within this cave lived a magical, mysterious person, right? Who just knew all kinds of stuff, like a mystic, a shaman, right? And this, you would go to this person, right? And this was like the master astrologer, if you will, except she's in a cave. And so you go to her and you would ask her various things about, what is the truth? And then she'll say something like, well, Apollo wants you to do this, or Dionysus, another god is suggesting that you do the other, right? She had to put it in terms of the gods, otherwise, they'd come for her, right? Uh, Now, query, one of my many digressions. You might want to check this out on your own. More recently, they've done studies of where they think the actual cave is outside of Athens, and there is, I think it's a system of caves, and there are pockets of some type of a natural gas. I don't know if it's methane or what it is, that seep into these caves to this day. Okay, and they can detect this, and it's kind of like breathing carbon dioxide in a garage, right? You don't want to do that because what will happen? First, it'll alter your mind, and then it will bring your being to a close. People die that way, sometimes intentionally, right? You put yourself in an enclosed space, you let the car exhaust go, right? You trip out, you see all kinds of stuff, then you fall asleep, and then you die. Well, along those lines, there are some who suggest that in this cave system, there is some kind of a natural gas naturally seeping into the cave from below. It might be methane, I'm not sure. But it has the effect of kind of making the person loopy, or I guess more accurately, putting a person in a somewhat different state, right? Altering their state of consciousness, or at least perception. So it is possible that there was an actual oracle of Delphi, and she wasn't possessed of particularly metaphysical knowledge, nor was she making all this shit up necessarily. She may have just been profoundly under the influence. Okay, and so when she would talk, people would say, "I kind of understand what she's saying, but I kind of don't understand what she's saying." So must be brilliant. So, anyways, Socrates, or whatever the hell his name is, he goes to see the Oracle of Delphi, right? So he goes down into the cave, and so he asks her, according to Plato, one question and one question only: who is the wisest man in all of Athens? And her answer is Socrates is the wisest man in all of Athens. So Socrates comes back to Socrates and said, "Hey, bro, rejoice, man." Right? What a lot of us suspected all along is actually the truth. We just heard it from the oracle, right? And if she says it's true, it's the bomb. She says you're the smartest guy around, right? And so at first Socrates doesn't want to hear it, right? He kind of blows the guy off, but Socrates is serious about this. And so Socrates would later tell his students, this is the realization that he came to. If I'm the smartest guy in Athens, we're fucked, because I don't think I'm that bright. But Socrates said at that point he realized what a heavy responsibility he now had. Because if he is the smartest or close to the smartest person around, him knowing, right, that he's not very bright, one of the defining characteristics, personal characteristics and philosophical characteristics of Socrates and the whole Socratic position is that one must start from the position, not that I am so freaking smart, what other knowledge can I gain? Socrates says, no, man. If that's your opening position, right? If you're fooling yourself into thinking that you're smart, right? Then all these areas that you think you've already mastered intellectually, what you're doing is you're closing the door to those rooms, and you're saying, I know what's in that room. I will never walk through that door again. What else can I learn? And Socrates says, you don't know what's in that room, right? I mean, the person who has the audacity and the emotional immaturity, right, and the conceit to say, I know all kinds of shit, Socrates is saying that's no philosopher. That person will never come close to the truth, right? Because that person is already precluding a thorough and honest and mature investigation that has any intellectual integrity of the stuff that's in the room that to which he's already thrown the key. And so Socrates says, look, your starting position must be, I know nothing. Admit to yourself that compared to all of the beautiful mysteries of the universe, that you know nothing. That's the place to start from. And so Socrates said that I knew at that moment that I had the responsibility to just own up to the reality, right? That I am the doofus that I am. And from this position of tremendous, regrettable, but honest ignorance, from this position, right? Now I can genuinely venture out and seek the truth. Because as yet I know nothing. Therefore, what remains for me to learn is everything. And Aristotle said that may not only be the best mindset by which to pursue the truth, it may be the only starting position from whence the truth may ever be attained. And so Socrates says, man, I know nothing. Uh, but since I know nothing, and since, oh, modest me, I am convinced that there's got to be someone smarter than me, right? There just has to be, because I ain't that smart. Again, this is Socrates' position, right? What Socrates says, that is when I realized that I needed to go find someone more wise than me, because I knew there had to be someone smarter than me. I can't be it, right? We're doomed if it's me. There's got to be someone smarter than me. So I must go find that person, because that person is closer to the truth than I am, right? And by the way, the definition of philosopher is lover of wisdom. I mean the literal definition from ancient Greek, the language, right? Lover of wisdom. And so he said, uh, I must love wisdom. I am pursuing wisdom, right? I am the philosopher. The only true philosopher is the person who admits they know nothing and pursues wisdom, right? And so he said, I must find someone wiser than me and leverage that person's greater intelligence, because that person's closer, right? That person will help me get to the truth. So that is why he says, from that point on, for about the last 40 years of his life, every single day of the last approximately 40 days of his life, he did the same damn thing all day long. He roamed the streets of Athens, and he would go up to people, maybe not so much who he thought was wise, because how can he know how wise another person is until he engages that person in some kind of a discussion? And so this is where Socrates the cynic comes in, right? This is where Socrates, the son of a bitch, who was quite prepared to expose those who suggest they know it all, to expose them for the lying, empty pimps that they are. Socrates had an edge about him, right? He's not exactly a people person. Socrates detests intellectual dishonesty, right? What Socrates really hated was the pronouncement by the individual that he is bitching, that he knows all, right? That he should be treated, right, like a badass. And so Socrates would go to those people, not to their private offices, right, in the halls of finance or the legislature, right? He would go to these people, those who walked around as if they knew everything, right? He would go to these people in public where other people could see their discussion. He would go up to them and he would ask them questions like, Senator, why did you vote for this last week when you voted against against the same thing several months ago, right? He would go up to people who held positions of power. He would go up to people who behaved themselves, comported themselves publicly as if they were possessed of great knowledge, right? And basically what he was saying is, you're possessed of great knowledge? Okay, let's check it out. And he would interrogate them with questions, question after question after question. He was quite evidently a remarkably and deviously adept questioner. He exposed these guys for what they were, which is a bunch of empty suits, right? In other words, he pissed off exactly the type of people that you don't want to piss off if you want to stay alive. You see that? But after about 40 years of, in a way, you have to ask yourself, it took them 40 years to finally kill his ass? They must have hated this guy. I mean, can you imagine being someone with wealth or power? And let's face it, back in Athens, as has almost been the case throughout history, you got one, you got the other. You ever notice that? Wealth and power, you got one, a lot of it, chances are you've got more than a little bit of the other. Socrates would go to the wealthy and the powerful. Why? Because it's the wealthy and the powerful who much more regularly suggested that they had answers. Socrates would comment, isn't it curious that the more meek among us, the poor folk, us poor folk don't necessarily go around saying, well, I know all kinds of shit. There's something about wealth and power that makes people, right, in louder and louder voices say, I know the truth. And so Socrates would later say, and he would say at his trial, where of course he was found guilty, that since he was seeking truth, and since there were certain people in Athens who either acted as if or openly declared that they knew certain truths, it made sense to go up to them and ask them about their truths. So finally, they've had enough of this. He's brought up on a bunch of charges. They basically boil down to two types of offenses, and they're the classic ones. One is, of course, that he was corrupting Athenian youth. He was corrupting the development of a proper, polite, respectful of elders. Right? He was corrupting Athenian youth. Which of course he was, in the sense that what he was teaching his students was question authority, right? Maybe not in those words, but to seek the truth is to necessarily perhaps question any authority that suggests that it is possessed of the truth. If I'm seeking the truth, and someone is standing at that door and says, through this door is the truth, I know it, well then if you're really pursuing truth, you got to go there. Someone just told you that that's where it is. Or somebody else, steps forward and says, vote for me. I am the holder of the truth. Okay. Tell me what you know. And of course, the other thing that he was brought up in charges of was of denigrating, basically dissing the gods. Socrates tried to be careful. He didn't go out of his way, to say Apollo's a jerk, or Zeus doesn't exist. At times he would confide to his students that the reason why he didn't speak of the great Athenian gods very often is because he just didn't think it was worth his time. So he didn't feel it necessary to tell his students, these gods don't exist, right? He wasn't sure whether they existed or not. But it was evident through the types of inquiries that he led his students on and the types of questions that he asked, right? Privately among his students, publicly of powerful people in the streets and the courtyards and the plazas of Athens. It was evident that Socrates did not particularly think that the Athenian god system was an avenue for the finding of the truth. Because Socrates' position, this is another one of his defining characteristics, is that perhaps ultimately the objective truth that we can know using our rational faculties already lies within. Perhaps some of the greatest truths of the universe already lie within. And so in that sense, and for that reason, I suggest that there's some real parallels between Socrates and Buddha. It's amazing how in ancient China, in ancient what is now India, the Indus Valley, but also in Greece, the rise of the axial age, the rise of intellectual movements that would ultimately become, if you will, monotheistic imaginations. Some of the parallels between some of their planks and doctrines. It's amazing. There's no. I mean, some have tried to suggest that Socrates actually went to the Indus Valley and met early Buddhists. I I think that's doubtful. But there are certain commonalities which strike me as interesting at a minimum between the big three uh, uh, axial, ultimately monotheistic, deistic imaginations that arose at approximately the same time in very different parts of the world. And so part of the Socratic position is that the answer lies within. And so Socrates used to say, and actually was a saying that was started by the Oracle of Delphi, but Socrates adopted it and said, look, this is an important concept for us to hold on to as we pursue the truth. Know thyself. Know thyself. If anyone's had any exposure to Buddhism and the thinking of the Buddha, that's core Buddhism. Know thyself, right? Why? Because it's advantageous to a good life, yeah, but also because Socrates is suggesting, in a way that Plato would really try to dig into, that the great answers of this amazing, mysterious universe are actually not without us, but perhaps rather already within. And so that leads me now to discuss, because I think it has merit, the teaching approach of this guy Socrates, the pedagogical approach of Socrates as a teacher. If you have you ever heard of the Socratic method? Uh, 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 yeah, I know of one of you who is planning to go to law school. There may be others, but I know that one of you is already committed to the notion of going to law school. And she shook her head immediately because she knows that uh, she will come to know the Socratic method, and it's going to come to know you. Okay, so here the Socratic method is one in which the teacher does not deliver unto her students pronouncements of faith or truth or even answers. Instead, the teacher guides and facilitates an exploration of ideas and concepts and perhaps truisms among the students. And the role of the teacher, Socrates suggests to us through the ages, the role of the teacher is to guide, right, productively, advantageously, guide the group conversation, right, toward more elevated, insightful, and revealing places, right? And so in the Socratic method, the teacher almost never answers a question, at least not in a classic propositional way, right? Well, I propose that this is the answer, right? Write it down, memorize it, right? We're all about rote memory. That's all we do. And Socrates would say, If that's all you do, then that's all you're going to get. That's not an education. That's not using your intelligence. It's memory. My dog Amber, wherever she is right now, probably digging into something bad. My dog Amber memorizes certain things, right? As far as a doggy goes, I think she's pretty smart, right? But it's not at all apparent to me that Amber, all due respect, has engaged in the perennial questions of the ages, like, well, why are we here? maybe I, maybe that says a lot about me as a teacher, right? Another way of describing this is that I think Socrates had a tremendous respect for the intellect of his students, not just because they were his students and he gets to know them, and an affinity can grow between a teacher and her student, right? You ever had a teacher who you just really began to care about on a personal level, right? And a teacher that motivated you, right? Someone that you really came to care about, right? Someone who you would tell your friends and other people, hey, this person's just onto something, man. They're just, they're at another place. This person gets me, and this person, not the others, this person can take me to a worthwhile place. Uh, I, I I think Socrates had an undying respect for his students, not just because they were his students, but because it reflects Socrates' conviction that we all hold the truth within us. And so his role of the teacher is to help us come to terms with truisms within. And sometimes we just stand in our own way, and we close doors within our own psyche, within our own being, within our own yeah, I'm going to go there, soul, right? And Socrates is like, closeth not any doors, man. Leave them all open, right? You never know. Leave everything open so that you may know. And so Socrates was just trying to help his students, right, find find their own intellectual genius from within themselves. And so by responding to a question from his student in front of the other students, right, he would ask another questions, or perhaps more to the point, more frequently, he would repose the question in a slightly different way, right? And so over time, this is the way that I think about it. And I started, we all have different ways that we latch onto ideas and so on. When I was in law school, I thought of it in this way. Sometimes an idea, a good one that's being played with by, really good inquisitive minds, an idea can become like an entity floating in the middle of the room, right? And everyone's taking different cuts at the nature of that thing that's in the middle of the room, that particular idea, right? And by asking this question, asking that question, asking the 23rd question in a slightly different way, this idea, which is like a lump of clay, over time, together, we give this clay shape, and necessarily clumps of it just need to fall to the floor, because it becomes apparent they're not going to be a part of the final form. We thought they might, but then upon further investigation and inquiry, no, this lump doesn't fit, right? So we're just going to tuck it over here. It may be worthwhile, right, toward the formation of some other form, but for the form of this idea, may we one day know it as a truth. It is taking shape because we together are giving it shape, and not because a teacher or a loudmouth, right, in the room is saying, hey, this is what it is, everyone follow my lead. And so that's that's essentially the Socratic method. But right, but what's the madness behind the method? The madness behind the method is the audacity to have faith in the inherent intellectual ability of the student herself, and that when a teacher comes along and says, "Booyah, there's the truth. Deal with it," you you may well be doing nothing other than stifling that person's growth, right? It's like, oh, that's the truth. You just layered some heavy truth on me. Okay, under the weight of this truth, your truth, right? Um, I may grow no more. There's no room for me to grow, man. This thing's heavy. It may not be the truth, but it's heavy, and it's kind of cutting off my ability to pursue that which might be true. And so Socrates would say, that's not the role. That's not the role of a teacher. So a little bit more on Socrates the man before we see him leave this earth. Um, he was apparently nobody's eye candy. He was not regarded as an aesthetically pleasing human being to the eye, right? I'm trying to be very polite. I'll just say it. Brother apparently was butt ugly. Yeah, just a big nose, had a crazy beard, which if you took 3080 with me, I suggest must almost be a prerequisite to maybe not to high intellectualism, but to innovation. Some of the great innovators had some crazy ass, uh, 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 crazy ass hair. Uh, uh, Socrates was apparently never met a bar of soap that he liked. His hygienic proclivities were almost completely absent. He was almost always barefoot by choice. Supposedly he had a wife, but many of his students wondered if he was at least occasionally, in the most literal sense, a homeless guy. And to the extent that he was, they figured it was probably a personal choice. He just the matters of this world did not really concern him. An ascetic life, Aescetic, an ascetic life that would later be modeled by early Christian monks, right? After Saint Augustine, the 400s, actually the monkhood started actually before Augustine, sorry, but monks of the early medieval, right up to Martin Luther, who started the Reformation in 1517. He was an Augustinian Catholic priest, which is to say, he was at least at various times in his service in the Catholic Church before he basically said "fuck the Catholic Church" and started the Lutheran movement and the Protestant Reformation. Uh, uh, he was a monk at various times, and by that what I mean the ascetic life is um, wear the same clothes every day. I don't necessarily have shoes. Maybe I live in a cave or underneath the same tree, day after day, year after year, right? Because it's the matters of the physical world which are not the point, right? Um, uh, one other important aspect about the death of Socrates. So he's brought up on charges. There was this very infamous trial. He had a jury of a little over 500 people. Why? Because recall, Athens at this time, Athens was a direct democracy, right? The American democratic experiment may continue for at least a while. The American democratic experiment, as all democratic experiments are essentially predicated on the Athenian experience, but Athens is probably the last great direct democracy beyond like a small island state or something like that. Um, and it was such a direct democracy. In other words, all decisions were made by all citizens, right? More specifically, by non-slaves who happen to be men. Okay, so I told you, Amber's pissed. She's like, I know the truth, pendejo, old man. Amber's in stereo. She was outside. Now she's over there, right? Hopefully, one of the kids will figure something out. Where was it? Oh, so his trial. So he had over 500 jurors, right? And the final vote that found him guilty was apparently along about 280 to about 220. That was the way that the vote broke down. But during his trial, he was given the opportunity to basically cop a plea. Right, a plea bargain was made available to him, and he turned it down because the plea bargain was basically shaped like this. Socrates apparently is standing in front of like a the way I think of it is like an arena where they have bullfights, right? That's the way I think of it. I was in Spain last year, so the bullfight, right? An arena, and so the 500 people are sitting around him, and so he's standing in the middle of the dirt, right? And he's literally having to stand and defend himself, right, for hours. And finally, he's given a plea agreement toward the end of the trial when it's clear that he's going to be found guilty. And the plea agreement was such that he would have to renounce, first of all, everything that he ever said or suggested and taught. He would have to deny the veracity, the truth of anything that he ever suggested he or his students should find true and worthwhile in this life. And he would need to say to all of his students that he was essentially a fraud. And so, Socrates apparently thought about that for, a nanosecond and rejected the plea to the horror of his students. And so several hours later, he is in fact found guilty, and so he's taken back to his cell. And in one of Plato's dialogues, I think it was the trial of Socrates is essentially the title. Plato wrote two dialogues that deal with the death of Socrates. One was the trial of Socrates, and the other is named after the prison guard who later that night goes to Socrates and says, you're crazy to have rejected the plea agreement, but I have been bribed handsomely in order to get your ass out of here. And so in that dialogue written by Plato, Socrates has this fascinating discussion with the prison guard. And it's a dialogue between two people, mano a mano, just the two of them, right? In Socrates' cell, he's just been found guilty. The next day, he's going to die. And so the prison guard comes to him and tells him, look, I've been paid off. It's all been arranged, right? The horse he's waiting. You'll never see Athens again, right? But you're going to live. We found another island for you. You're going to be well provided for, right? Nobody needs to know. As it turns out, Plato and some people related to Plato actually put up a significant portion of the money. Plato actually came from a relatively wealthy family. But one of the reasons I think why Plato, as we will see as we get into Plato's classic, The Republic, one of the reasons why Plato takes such a hardcore position against the democratic form of government is because it was the Athenian democracy that rigged the trial. First of all, that put his master on trial, rigged it, and then had him killed. And so that is why Plato adopts his master Socrates' position when it comes to the democratic form of government, which is that ain't the way to be. Why? Because the Socratic and the Platonic position on the democracy really revolves around this conviction. Every democracy is a precursor, a predecessor to tyranny, because the the historical evolution of political systems under this imagination, Socrates and Plato, is that you have these cycles of rule by the few, which Athens had for a long time, and then ruled by the many, which Athens took to the max because they had basically ruled by the all, a direct democracy. If you were a man, and as long as you weren't a slave, you were a voting citizen. Okay. Uh, but for Socrates, even before they brought him up on charges, and for Plato, certainly after they killed his beloved master, all a democracy is mob rule. And so whatever the mob wants is what you're going to get. But majority rule, which they recharacterize as simply mob rule does not necessarily have the group dynamic within it that lends itself to a careful deliberation of what's in the best interest of the state. A mob rule will quickly descend into everybody, right? Just agreeing with whatever asshole has the strongest voice and the biggest fist. That is my paraphrasing of the essential Socratic Platonic position on democracy. And it is for that reason, toward the end of a democracy, what you see is more and more flashpoints of mob rulism. You will see democratic results, you will see votes, you will see elections that represent the triumph of the mob. The mob used to be some kind of eccentric, crazy, extremist splinter group within society, but over time it grows, if for no other reason than because demagogues tend to have staying power. The demagogue does not take no for an answer, right? The demagogue keeps fighting and screaming and agitating, right? Until the contrarian extremist position becomes a more and more tolerated and ultimately acceptable. And then at a certain point, you have an election result, and lo and behold, the crazy mob, the extremists, have won. And at that point, the only thing that remains is for this mob democracy to head almost like a centrifugal force of physics to where it was headed to anyways, which is what? Rule of the one tyrant, the one demagogue, who may then elevate himself to a demigod or even higher, right? The Führer. And so that is why Socrates, even before they brought him up on charges, Socrates says, you know how this is going to end, don't you guys? You know how this is going to end. So Socrates is having this discussion with the prison guard. And Socrates, lo and behold, says, I'm not going to go with you. And the prison guard's like, do you know how much money I've been paid to do this? I'm risking everything, man. I'm gonna have to leave Athens and never come back with you. Yeah. And Socrates is, I appreciate what you're trying to do, right? And you know, I kind of thought it was gonna come down this way, but let me tell you why I can't go with you. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not quoting this particular dialogue, right? But I think I got it. Socrates, let me tell you why I'm not going to go with you. I'm an Athenian, man. I didn't do everything I've done my whole life because I hate my country. I love this country. I went to war for this country. I saw some shit during that war, right? Which kind of messed me up for a while, right? And everything I've done for the last 40 years, it wasn't to destroy my country. It's because I believe in a greater Athens. An Athens that has the intellectual integrity and the emotional maturity, right, to pursue the truth. I think I'm on to what is basically the only way to pursue the truth, which is with honesty. And if holders of power are not willing to be honest, if that becomes evident through the give and take of what do you think is the truth, what do you think is the truth, what do you think is the truth, and if the people can see that all too often their leaders are pimps who don't care about the truth, no more than they know any of it. No, I haven't done this to destroy Athens. I've done this in the hope that one day, not during my lifetime, but one day, we would have a greater Athens, the Athens that we're supposed to have, the Athens that her people deserve. Athens is her people. Her people have decided to have this kind of government. I have suggested that it may go haywire, and I'm suggesting to you that my trumped up charges in this whole rig trial is evidence that it has, but it's still a function and a result of the people's will. We have laws in Athens, and every once in a while those laws are going to suck. We're not always going to get it right, but we have to obey the laws. We may challenge them. We may, and sometimes we must protest them. But to escape the law is no answer. And so he said, I lived and fought as an Athenian. I'm going to die as an Athenian. Am I heartbroken that the Athens that exist is not the Athens that her people deserve? Of course I am. But I can no longer leave the land that I love. Then I could tell my students earlier today that everything I said was a lie. That's a paraphrase, right? So what is Socrates' ultimate point? What is Socrates' ultimate objective? His ultimate objective, of course, is the truth, right? That's been his lifelong mission, at least since the trippy cave incident with the Oracle of the Delphi, right? That has been his mission. Part of what he wanted his students to appreciate is that this objective truth that has just got to be out there. It's just got to be out there, right? And we will one day know it through using our reason and drawing from the eternal truth that has always lied within. The beauty and the power of one day being able to know that truth and to share that truth with one another, to celebrate that truth together, being able to get there one day, that's got to be among the things that are worth living for. And just as there are things that are worth living for, there must be some truths that are so powerful, so important, so eternal, and so beautiful that they must be worth dying for. And so I am quite prepared to die for this one truth. My truth is we must pursue the truth. Why else are we here? Uh, Later that night, he meets with the rest of his students, right? The guard comes back and tells him, that's one trippy ass teacher you guys got, man. Right? I'm going to take my money, thank you very much. And you guys ain't never going to see me anymore. But you're also never going to see your master because he's not going to do it. Uh, Plato has connections. Actually, um, during this time, um, I should point out, Athens is under the subjugation of its hated of the hated Spartans. This is a period of time, right? The yin and the yang, right? We kick their ass, they kick our ass, right? Um, Sparta has its boot on the neck, pun not necessarily intended, of Athens at this time, and so Athens is being run by what they call the Terrible 30, and the Terrible 30 was basically a group of Athenians who cut a deal with Sparta, and Sparta, as a number of empires throughout history have learned, usually the hard way, whether it's the Roman Empire, the British Empire of the 19th century, or what remains of the American Empire. Foreign occupation is very, very expensive. And so Sparta, having been in tune with this reality, Sparta realized that the easier way, because they were waging other wars at the same time, the easier way to administer Athens was to not impose a bunch of Spartans coming in and occupying seats of government. They would find Athenians who would be willing to administer Athens the way Sparta wanted it administered, right? Not unlike the way Hong Kong has been administered, right? Part of the takings of the British Empire was, of course, Hong Kong by virtue of the Opium Wars in the 1850s with China. And so that is why Hong Kong was under British rule until what? I think 1999, right? And then the 50-year agreement from 99 or 2000 until 2050 is that China during this intervening period will oversee Hong Kong, but that Hong Kong will be able to make her own political democratic determinations, and then come 2050, then it is fully reverts to China, and China may do what it wants, right? Well, China is trying to move up the clock a little bit and impose its will on Hong Kong right now. Well, the Terrible Council of 30 were Athenians, but they had cut their deal with Sparta, and so my point is that most, not all, but many Athenians looked at these 30 Athenians as bandidos, right? They were turncoats, right? You're not Athenian. You're doing whatever the Spartans tell you to do. You pimp, right? You're on the take. Well, two of these 30 were members of Plato's family. One of them was an uncle, and the other was like an uncle, or compadre or something. It's twice removed or something like that. But a more distant relative of Plato's. But one of them was actually an uncle, as in the sibling of one of Plato's parents. So Plato is able to for he and at least a group of Socrates students, right, maybe 15 or so, to have a final hour or so with their beloved master. And so it's in this last final session where Socrates says goodbye to his students, and he explains to them, right, why it is that he didn't take the plea bargain, and why it is that he didn't agree to go with the bribed prison guard. right? And we know why that is, right? I mean, you can probably feel it right now. He had to be a martyr. There's no other rightful / righteous way for this story to end. By dying, he validates and verifies everything that he ever stood for, right? Because part of his core message, at least among his more mature, and what by that I mean those among his students who really got him, right? They weren't undergrads or masters. They were working. They were deep into their doctoral thesis with the guy. All right, those who really got him. They knew that they really knew, and Plato really knew that he had to be martyred, because part of his core message was there are truths that are worth dying for. Well, how can you take that position and then take the easy way out when the thing that you've been found guilty of is basically pursuing the truth? So the whole conviction, the whole philosophy, the whole way of being that Socrates suggested was the righteous way to live, the whole thing comes crumbling under its own weight if he says, "Oh shit, you mean I'm going to lose my life?" Fuck no! Where's my get out of jail free pass? And so Socrates has this one line where he said, "My life cannot be as important as what we shared together during my life. My life cannot be that important." So what's he saying? It's it's the truth that we dared to pursue together. That's what matters, right? And so because Socrates also believes that we have a soul, Socrates is not too concerned with the earthly existence. Now, Plato. Plato would take, among other things, his master's imagination of us as being possessed of souls. He would take that to a whole nother level. Are there any questions about Socrates? Because I think I'm about ready to leave our master Socrates. Any questions at this point? Uh, Plato. Plato wrote about maybe 40 or so, 40 to 50 works. The majority of them are referred to as dialogues, Plato's dialogues. Why are they dialogues? Because the literary device that he uses is that in these works called the dialogues, collectively known as the dialogues, they are literally that. They read like a screenplay, right? And so the one Socratic or the one Platonic dialogue that we're going to investigate the next couple of lectures is, of course, Plato's Republic. And in Plato's Republic, you see it's like a screenplay, right? It's like line after line after line. Socrates said this. Socrates said that. And so that's the literary device that Plato uses. Um, just to kind of set the stage, for these last 2,300 years, there's been rabid discussion about, well, how much of what let's take the Republic, the four corners of the Republic, the one masterpiece that we're investigating. How much of what is attributed to Socrates in Plato's Republic was actually said by Socrates, versus how much it is actually imaginations and concepts and even then innovative brand new ideas that are actually the product of Plato's mind, but the literary device is that he's having Socrates give voice to these. We don't know. I mean, Plato offers us no guideposts in this particular regard. So you've got some scholars will say, oh, 71% was Socrates. um, my own sense is that particularly with respect to the Republic, the more metaphysical concepts that we see in the Republic, which are also replicated in a couple of other works like the Timaeus, where Plato has Socrates talking about the ultimate nature of the universe, and the notion that the physical world is not the real world, that the apparently physical world that you and I think that we inhabit right now is really an illusion, but that there is a true world and it exists somewhere else. I think that in the main, and there's a whole lot more to that, right? I'm just introducing the concept. In the main, I think that's Plato. I agree with those who say, nah, there were enough opportunities in other of Plato's works, or Xenophon for that matter, for for us to draw that type of trippy cosmological construct from really the person and the mind of Socrates. Because of the way that Plato talks about this trippy metaphysical stuff in the Republic, mirrored in other works like Timaeus, it just seems more true to me as I read other people's take on this. It just seems more true to me that this deeper, more profound otherworldism, referred to in philosophy as idealism, not idealism uh, as in a contemporarily progressive political thought, right? And so as a young free thinking a person in a democracy, I progressive / liberal policy. Now that's idealism in the sense of what's real in the universe are ideas, and what we believe is physical reality is 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 subservient to and profane when compared to the reality of true reality, which is intellect, ideas, consciousness. That's the type of idealism that we're referring to, and so I think that's profoundly that's really Plato's. So uh, in the Republic, uh, the story begins with Socrates walking down a road with a couple of other guys. One of them is named Glaucon, Glaucon, and Glaucon apparently in real life was a younger brother to Plato, and so Glaucon is kind of like the muse in the Republic, right? Glaucon is the one person, the one character in this work who asks Master Socrates the most questions, right? So Glaucon is the guy who's elucidating a lot of the brilliance from the mind of Socrates, and so they're walking along this. This is a wild reductionist kind of sliver representation of the Republic. I mean, it's a thousand pages long. It's a tremendous work. So um, I, I think it only fair to say that justice cannot be given to the Republic in the amount of time that we have together. Um, but we will do our best. Um, there's this optional activity for you if you'd like in our opening module, and you can see it's a lecture by a Yale professor named Stephen Smith. And if you have the time, I would commend it to you. Everyone's got a different take on Plato's. I've got the way that I do it. Professor Smith from Yale, of course. I've listened to a whole bunch of his lectures on Plato, and I've never heard him use the word Vinci. I do. Everyone's got their way, is all I'm saying, right? So, um, but I love this. I love the way that Stephen Smith tees up the issue, even though he uses no profanity whatsoever, and I still think it's interesting. And I'm just gonna quote it here. I think it's just great because he's a great professor, right? I mean, kind of thought he would be. He's at Yale, you know. He starts every semester. He starts apparently this way. There is one person in here. I don't know who it is, and you will not know who it is yet. But there is one person in here for whom the reading of Plato's Republic will be the most intellectual experience you have here at Yale. It is a book that one of you will go back to time and time again, and it will stick with you forever. What I would like you to do is to remember this. And 4 years from now, when most of you are ready to graduate, if that one person in here would email me and let me know who it is, okay? Maybe it'll be you. Maybe, possibly, or you, okay? This is the book that started it all. The Apology, the Credo, these are prior evidences of Plato's genius. These are warm-ups to the big theme, to the big book, the Republic. Every other book in this political science that has since been written, beginning with Aristotle's Politics and moving on to the present day, is, in one way or another, an answer, a response to Plato's Republic. It started the whole thing. A similar homage to the beauty that is Plato's Republic comes to us from about a hundred years ago. There was an amazing mathematician turned philosopher by the name of Alfred North Whitehead, and wherever he is, it's probably a source of some disappointment for the guy that he is best known perhaps for this one quote, as opposed to the amazing work that he did in mathematics with another great mathematician turned philosopher, Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell, the same guy who wrote The History of Western Philosophy in 1940, which is still one of the great works of secondary works seeking to explain the arc, trajectory, and nature of the history of Western philosophy. But Alfred North Whitehead is the guy who said this about Plato. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially what he said was, all of Western philosophy is merely a series of footnotes to Plato. Can you imagine that? Right? What's he saying? Of all of the humongous brains that have existed in the last 2,300 years, all of them, man, all of them. Aristotle, Aquinas, right? I get all funky at this point, right? John Locke, Immanuel Kant, right? All of these guys, the giants, all of them, man. At their best, they represent footnotes, footnotes to Plato. Why, uh, why do we look at the Republic? If you look at slide 11, if you happen to have it available to you, in the Republic, Plato discusses themes as important and varied as, now get this, the afterlife. Heavy subject, that could be a book in itself, right? The afterlife, truth, justice, multiple dimensions of reality, democracy, totalitarianism, state propaganda, wealth, and finally, one of Plato's great preoccupations, greed, human greed. Why do I say it in that way? With added drama? That's right, because I'm giving my students a clue, right? There are clues, right? Breadcrumbs. Teachers do that, right? Greed. When you come across an aspect of Plato's thought, particularly in the area of political philosophy, like for example, his aversion to democracy, or Plato's deep commitment to the practice of communism in his ideal state, the Republic. It makes sense. Let me suggest it may make sense once you come to terms with the fact that Plato's deepest concern politically in the Republic, its political dimension, has to do with the dangers and the ravages and the inequity and the atrocities that stem from our ancient human greed. And so that is the great fear. That is the great abiding fear that is central to Plato's at least political philosophy, that then really mandates certain aspects of his political philosophy, like the suggestion that we should all happily exist in a communist state. But to understand more fully why we should not only tolerate but embrace a communist state, to understand that is to understand perhaps the one great meta message, if you will, in my opinion, of Plato's Republic. And that is that all of government, the way that we organize ourselves, the way that we allocate power, which is what government is, the way that a society chooses to allocate power. What's an economy? An economy is the way that a society chooses to allocate stuff. Those are my basic working definitions of those two huge concepts, right? Once you understand that Plato's government, how we allocate power, and economics, how we allocate stuff, government and economics are ultimately governed by the righteous, eternal need for we as a species to pursue and one day secure the truth. Because as Plato spells out carefully, meticulously, but not necessarily directly. And in a profoundly Socratic way, Plato doesn't beat us across the head and say, well, this is the pinchy truth. One has to read it and investigate it, right? To understand, oh, this is what he's saying. What Plato is saying is that the only way, now let me suggest that if one were taking notes, This is where you change the color, or whatever your own personal note-taking thing, right? Or if you put a little arrow or a happy face or a sad face, right? Whatever connotes to you when you come back and revisit your notes, right? That that the old man thought that this was important. The old man thinks that thinks that this is important. The only way that we're going to reach the truth, I think what Plato is ultimately saying, is to live in a society that is structured, I mean, literally structured in such a way that we have a chance of achieving it. Now, for Plato, um, Plato doesn't necessarily think that we're all created equal. And what I mean by that is that Plato understands that some of us are more predisposed to be receptive to the type of philosophical training that will one day hopefully put us in a position to maybe touch the truth. I'm not saying that Plato believes that some of us are smarter than others. I'm coming close to that. I'm not quite prepared to say that's his position. What I'm saying is that Plato believes that we have different skill sets, all of us, and not all of us are equipped to to be the type of philosopher who should govern society. So Plato believes that the ideal society is governed, right, uh, by the same pimps who killed his Socrates. No, 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 by philosophers. Of course, Plato would say, "Oh, who should run the joint? Me. I'm Plato. I'm smart. I don't know. Little old me, right? How humble I am." But Plato's point is that look, we may never know the truth. It's going to take a lot for us to really approach the truth, but we got to try. Uh, and uh, and so we must create a society that elevates those among us who might be able to touch the truth and then deliver it to the rest of us, right? And so those who are philosophers, right, they should run the place. And the one thing that perhaps may prevent even the most well-intended philosopher from achieving the truth is a preoccupation and obsession with the material world, which doesn't exist anyways, right? But the thing about the material world is it can feel good, it can taste good, right? After a while, depending on your tastes, you can really like it. You can really like it a lot. Greed. If we allow those who have power to be able to use their power to satisfy their greed, to get so caught up in the material world, right? They will turn their attention from the pursuit of the truth, which after all does not exist in this material world. Do you see that? So in order to be able to taste the truth, which exists in another plane of reality, one must necessarily, right, divorce oneself, leave, or at least be not attached to the profanity of this material existence. Uh, but this material existence, it calls to us, right? It plays with us. It makes us feel good, right? And then it makes us feel better. It gets us high, right? And so that is why ultimate, that's the short version as we leave today's session. That is why in Plato's Republic there are three parts of government. There are the philosopher kings who run the place, and their job is basically twofold. One is, of course, to pursue the truth, but the other is because they are wise and because they're not caught up in material things, right? They are also thereby better able to perform their second great function, which is to do what is best for the people of the Republic. Why are they able to focus on what is good for the people of the Republic? Because they are not concerned with what's good for them. They ain't worried about their bank account. Why? Because we live in a communist state. Why do we live in a communist state? So that we all are detached from materialism. And in this essentially communist state, which class in our society has even less material stuff than the rest of us? What class is the most impoverished materially? That's right. It's the people who run the place. So I'll leave you with this. What Plato is saying is that the ideal society is the society which is structured in such a way that at least a part of it, the ruling class, may be able to touch the truth, identify the truth, learn it, and then deliver it to the rest of us. That is the reason why we even are here in this apparently physical existence as a species at all. And the only way that that's going to happen is by divorcing ourselves and particularly our leaders from the allure of a tasty but an ultimately false and profane material existence. And so society is composed of three parts: the rulers, the soldiers, and the workers. And the reason that society is composed of three parts is because our soul is composed of three parts: the intellect, the will, and the appetites. The philosopher kings are aligned with our intellect, the soldiers are aligned with our will, and the rest of us are working slobs, right, to take care of society's appetites. But the most dangerous appetite that we have, the one that will undo us, the one that will keep us from knowing the truth, and the one which ultimately can and will destroy the very soul itself, is greed, especially greed for material things, money. And so Plato says, as a matter of law, wealth and power must be divorced. And so, as I say goodbye until I see you again on Wednesday, think about this. When in human history has there ever been a society that lasted for more than a couple of generations, where as a matter of law, wealth and power were divorced? You could not have the other if you had one. If you can identify one, let me know, because I'm an old man. I haven't found it yet. Thanks very much. I'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you, guys.